I made a big purchase, Mike. At least in my world, it's exciting. It's a big deal.
What'd you buy?
D- I bought a pen.
I think I saw something about that.
So for the pen addicts out there, I recently picked up, and I've wanted one of these for darn near a year, maybe not quite that long. So I'm a fountain pen enthusiast for the listeners of Bookworm. If you follow me everywhere else, it's pretty obvious. But I picked up a Twisby Diamond 580, which sounds really cool, and I like it. But if you're not a fountain pen person, it makes zero sense whatsoever.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. It's all Greek to me.
I actually took Greek in college. Do you know that?
I did
I
not.
took 4 semesters. Now, it's not modern Greek, but it was Koine Greek. So, like the historical, like that's what, well, I guess it wasn't as far back as like Aristotle, but yeah, it's old Greek. But yeah, I took it. It's fun. So when people say, yeah, it's Greek to me, it's like I can't use that phrase because I do understand it, at least somewhat still. So there you go.
Nice.
So with the email course, so that's out now. Is it have you gone public with that? Like do I need to not put this in?
No, it is public. So
Okay.
as of recording date, so definitely by the time this is published, actually by the time this is published, it's probably going to be closed. But
Oh,
yeah, it is open to the public at the moment, and response to the course has been pretty amazing. Well, actually, response has been in one of two camps: either $1,000, that's ridiculous,
mm-hmm. Yup.
or $1,000, what a bargain.
That's usually the way it goes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been cool because the people who have actually gone through it are getting results, and they're all saying, "This has changed my life. This is amazing." But then, of course, there are other people who are just kind of dabbling. They're not really committed to that, and that's fine. You know, if you're in that camp and email is not a huge problem for you, then that course definitely is not for you. There's lots of other things you can buy in the free to $20 price range, which will give you just a little bit of info and just scratch the surface, and that maybe is more appropriate. But for the people who this is a significant problem, this is eating up their entire day. It's soul sucking, you know. Then those are the people that are getting the results. So it's been pretty cool to see. So
Cool. Yeah, no, I run into that quite a bit with any of the courses or just pretty much anything I do. I get some people that are, it's crazy expensive. Why would you charge that much for it? And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who are like, wow, you're giving that away? Really? Okay.
mhm.
And it doesn't seem to matter if you charge $1,000 or if you charge $17. It's always the spectrum, it seems. But
It's always too expensive for somebody, which is why the App Store has had a consistent race towards the bottom since it came into existence. It's if you listen to the majority of people, it's always too expensive because it's not free.
right, right. That's the general public's view, which is impossible to survive on, obviously. But I, I don't understand when people throw a fit when something costs money. It just doesn't make sense to me. And maybe that's just because I'm a developer and I understand people in that world quite well. I don't know if it's partly that or maybe I'm just more able to put myself in someone else's position. I don't know which one of those two it is, but for me, I just know that if I'm looking at a product, and we had a big to do over this with Text Expander whenever they up their rates quite a bit.
Hmm.
And, we run into these scenarios where developers and development companies either up rates or they change the model in such a way to where they make more money. Well, usually that's because their current model doesn't work and it doesn't pan out. So if you have somebody that's making a thing that you're going to consume, if it's going to be a quality thing, to me, it's got to be something that's paid. It can't be something that's completely free, at least all the time. There has to be a way for them to make at least some money. Otherwise, it's not substantial and it doesn't work and no one will continue to do it.
Right. And there's what people have to understand is the value of what you're getting. And if it's not a if there's no synergy there, then that's okay. Like that's what people don't understand is that they think that whatever you make, it's got to fit everybody. That's not really the case. I had this conversation with my wife, who's a wedding photographer, and she used to charge like $1,000 for a wedding, and those people were so demanding, and they were nitpicking everything, and they were
Mhm.
contacting her every 5 minutes and saying, "When's our album going to be done?"
Yep.
And once she raised her prices, she got clients who are like, "Oh, you did such a great job. We know you're busy. Take your time on the album, no rush." Like they understand the value of what
Yep.
they are getting. And that's the difference between like a professional photographer, because she's actually part of the Professional Photographers Association. And most people don't understand, like, I've got a digital camera, I'm a professional photographer. No, you're not. There's a lot of techniques and knowledge that you do not understand.
Yep.
So you get what you pay for. And that's the thing, like with the email course. And I guess this can kind of lead into my follow-up item here, which is continuing with what is the why behind all the things. Like this course has kind of cemented to me that I don't want to try to be all things to all people. There's got to be authenticity in what you're doing, and you can't try to please other people. And email is like one of the ways that manifests itself, because email is ultimately a to-do list that other people can write on. It's how they think that you should spend your time. And if you are going to try and please people all the time, you're going to agree to do all of these things via email that you don't really want to be doing. And what I've discovered with the email course is not that I don't care about the people who don't want to invest, okay? But maybe they're not at that point yet, and that's fine. But the people who are really going to value what we have are the people who are willing to invest heavily in it. And those are the people who are going to get the results. And like we talked about last time, it's getting those people those results that really gets me going. So why would I spend so much effort, so much time doing this thing that isn't sustainable, that I may think is valuable, but other people are not saying that it's valuable, and I'm trying to please them? No matter what I do, they're not going to think it's valuable.
Right.
There's got to be an alignment there. And when you find that alignment, when you find that sweet spot, that's when you really can know that, yes, this is the thing that I've been doing. So the process continues in my own life, every single thing falling under the microscope. And I don't think that this is ever going to be quote unquote done. But I do think that a couple books ago, when I started doing this, when we started talking about Start With Why, that kind of started me down a journey, which is leading me to constant refinement and ultimately compound progress, I guess is the best way to put it, where I'm cutting out the things that aren't supposed to be there, the things that aren't in alignment, and not even like the good things that are slightly off, but the things that are really hitting the mark. Those are the ones that I am doubling down on, that I am really investing in. And I don't really have a definition of done for this, but there is progress being made here, I guess, is the short version.
Okay. All right. I'll trust you on that. Because this is what we do to each other. We sit here and try to figure out, okay, so how do I hold you accountable to that? I don't know how to do that with this one, but okay. I will continue to put what is why behind all the things on.
Actually, if you really want to hold me accountable to this, just ask my wife, because she'll tell
Okay.
you. She'll tell you if I'm doing things that I really shouldn't be doing. Because usually when I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing, I get frustrated, and then she sees it.
Of course. I tell this to people all the time. I can't be upset. I can't be stressed. I can't be sleep deprived or anxious without my wife knowing immediately. Like it's impossible for me to keep that from her. It's just not not a thing I can do.
She's got
Maybe
a
that's
window
me.
into your soul.
Yeah, I'm not. Maybe I should never be a poker player, most likely. But just the way it is. So I've had a regression on my scheduling deal for deep work sessions.
Uh-oh.
I had gone into the digital side of things with scheduling those sessions, and it failed. It doesn't work. I spent, I think, 3 days. I had these sessions scheduled. I had them in place, and then I completely missed them. And you would think with the alarms and everything going off, I wouldn't, but I had been keeping the rest of my day on paper, and it didn't meld well. So because I had them in two different places, it didn't work out. So now I'm back to 100% paper again, Mike. which I need to be okay with. I just need I need to stop with the computer and just be okay with paper.
Yep, I I agree, and that's okay. I don't think I could do it, but that's okay. You just need to figure out what is really going to work for you. Sounds like paper is a thing. Plus, if you use paper, you get to use your brand new fountain pen more.
I know, and that's see. I think part of this might be why, because I now use the new pen whenever I'm writing out my daily schedule. So that means that it's kind of the new and shiny thing. So I like using it, and it makes it easier for me to stick to my daily schedule, and it makes it better for me to do my journaling at night. So it seems natural to me that I want to go use the pen and paper instead of putting it all on my digital calendar. Oops. But I like this. See, this is the dissonance of my mind. I love writing with pen and paper, but I love writing on the computer. And I like doing things on the computer, but I like doing them on pen and paper as well. So I'm in this constant mental fight between the two and trying to create a hybrid system that works between the two. Good luck getting me off of OmniFocus. That one is really well cemented. But when it comes to like journaling and creating a daily list, I still maintain what I call a dashboard in OmniFocus. It has my daily list. I still maintain that, but I'm kind of reviewing it and then putting it on paper is what the way it ends up working out. But anyway, long story short, I'm creating kind of this hybrid system because I can't seem to pick one or the other. And when I want one to work, it seems like I end up on the other. Complicated, I know.
Do you use
Speak.
the bullet journal method when you
I
transfer
I
stuff over?
don't. I don't remember where I saw this. Someone mentioned that they were using bullet journal alongside OmniFocus, and to me that makes zero sense. I don't understand that. It to me those seem like they're doing the same thing. That sounds counterintuitive to me, but
Well, I think you could use
it's
OmniFocus for all the planning stuff, and then when you're writing out your list for the day, you could write it in the bullet journal format, and then just kind of check things off as you go.
oh, that would make sense.
But I'm not really familiar with the bullet journal format. Like I've seen the website for it. I've not used it myself, so
Huh.
I can't tell you how effective that is.
Well, we'll talk about some of this later, I think. But I do some of the paper stuff. Like we'll talk about the rule of three later. But that particular piece of this book that we just went through, I've been incorporating that into like I write out my daily list and then I incorporate that rule of three for the day in there. But those tend to be summaries of what's on my technical task list. It's weird, Mike. I've had a number of people ask me to explain this, and I always struggle with it. But the way it generally works out, okay, I'm going to do my best here. The way it generally works out is I have my list of the hours in the day from 5 in the morning till 10 at night. And I spell out what I'm going to be doing at each point in the day. That's not anything new from what we've talked about in the past. Then we've adapted this rule of three from the book that we're getting ready to talk about. I've adapted that to spell out here are the three big things I want to accomplish today. Then I usually draw a line underneath that, and then if there's any like extra things that would be kind of nice to get, I'll put those underneath there, and then I'm just gonna work through my day and I check them off. But those three big things are the ones that I shoot for first, and that's what I use to plan out the rest of the day. And usually, what those are like, I've got a website I'm in the middle of right now, and I've got a lot of like put together the front page of the site. Like that'll be a list in that top three. But then within that, I'll have like 10 or 12 different little tasks that I'm using OmniFocus to help me work through. Does that make sense? So I've
Hmm.
got the bigger one, and then I've got the littler, the smaller broken out bits within OmniFocus, and that's where I maintain those.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm through that. Okay, so now that I've started in on the book, you should tell us what we're reading, what we read,
Yeah,
and introduce
you've
it.
teased it enough.
I know, right?
All right. So the book that we read this time is The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. And this is one that I picked. And honestly, I picked this one. Well, first of all, I've heard a lot of really good things about it. Chris has been on the Productivity Show, the Asian Efficiency Podcast. Just seems like a really interesting guy. And also, this was a book that we did in the dojo. So I kind of double dipped on this one, but this book is a little bit different format than pretty much anything else that we have read because it's broken down into, I don't have the physical book in front of me. I think it's like 25 shorter chapters. Is that correct?
I'm pulling it up right now. I think it was 7 parts.
Yep. But all of the chapters are very short, and they reference basically a single experiment that he did.
26.
26. I was pretty close.
And then there's an afterword where he does like a 1 year later thing. So
Yep. Yeah. And each of the chapters are very short. They focus on one specific experiment that he did. And they have the amount of time that it's going to take to read the chapter at the front of every chapter.
Which I loved.
Yeah. I saw you put that on the outline here. So I figured that you,
Was it
you really liked
for
that.
you? Was that accurate?
No, it took me a lot less time to do that. But I also didn't do it the way that he, I think, intended people to go through the book, which honestly, there's no way you could get through it in a 2-week period if you did it that way. Where
What's with authors doing that? I see that a lot anymore.
so many action items.
I know. But like the one I'm looking at right now, it's like 16 minutes, 54 seconds for the estimated reading time. And for me, I know that usually meant I could get through it in roughly 10 minutes. But
Yeah,
that doesn't include like the stuff at the end though, does it?
I'm not sure. I
don't
did
think it
not.
did.
I did not go through all of the exercises because a lot of the exercises, honestly, that he puts as the action items at the end of the chapters, I have done in some shape or form over the last several years. But this book is kind of written towards somebody who, in my opinion, is not that familiar or not that entrenched in productivity, whereas like I work full time for Asian efficiency and I'm around this stuff all day, every day. So like a lot of this stuff I'm familiar with, but for somebody who is just getting going with this sort of thing, this book could be really, really valuable because if it's the first time that you've done some of these exercises, I'm sure that some of them will blow your mind. Some of them are really going to work for you and you're going to see some substantial results. They're probably not all going to work for you, but that's okay. I mean, that's kind of the point. He talks about his experiences with all of these, and he shares a lot of statistics and a lot of studies and things like that. But really, it's focused on his experience. Like, I did this, and this is what I noticed. So he talks about, like, just one random example. He tried working 20 hours a week, and he tried working 90 hours a week. You know, and he determined that there really wasn't that much difference in terms of what he could actually get done. But so he just kind of shares his findings from implementing this stuff himself. And your mileage is probably going to vary a little bit because everybody's a little bit different. But there's definitely some solid principles in here that you can grab onto. And right away at the beginning, one of the things I really liked is that he talks about how productivity is not about doing more things. It's about doing the right things. I think the way that he puts it is that not all tasks are created equal. And I really like that. And we're kind of rethinking some things with Asian efficiency. The tagline for the podcast is do more and be better. And when we did that, when we created that tagline, we really meant that you could do more things and take more action, become better, take more action on your goals. But with the whole culture around productivity and time management and essentialism and deep work and all of that, they've really highlighted and articulated a specific pain point there where it's almost a fad right now to say like, no, you need to do less. And that's that's in the spirit of what we have been saying and teaching, but it doesn't come across that way, I guess. Like productivity is not just squeezing in one more thing. Productivity is consciously choosing the things that you say no to so that you have the margin to say yes to the things that are really important.
He says that productivity is about what you accomplish, not what you get done.
Yes.
If you can see the difference in those two terms, because I see this a lot, and he talks about this quite a bit. You know, we could sit and do email all day long. You know, for me, I have a number of forums that I participate in, and I get enough email and I get enough phone calls. I get enough of that stuff that I could literally spend my whole day on it, and I'd get absolutely nowhere. I would technically accomplish nothing. I would simply be busy the whole day. We've talked about this before, the busy versus,
Yep.
you know, actually accomplishing real stuff, the difference there. And he does redefine productivity in that sense. To me, it was fascinating that he took a year to just experiment.
Hmm.
To me, that's really cool, and that's why I didn't catch if you mentioned it or not, but that was the premise of this book. Is he went through this whole year of being productive and doing these experiments on himself after he got out of college, even though he had two job offers. He turned down two well-paying job offers. He turned them down so that he could spend a year experimenting on himself, which
Hmm.
is kind of fun. But he does this and then learns through that process that productivity isn't about being efficient, even though he uses that word a couple times, despite his own hatred for the word. It's not necessarily about just being efficient. It's about being efficient on the right thing. And like you're saying, we've talked about this in the past with like essentialism, and some of these other books, even the War of Art. Some of those we've talked about this concept of making sure you're focused on the right thing. And I think with what he talks about with a lot of these experiments that he goes through, and we'll talk about a few of them here, but he goes through all of these to show here's how you can go through the process of learning about yourself, and just explaining the awareness and being intentional. I think if you summarized all of the results that he gets off of this, even he spells it out a little bit too, of being intentional and being deliberate with what you're doing. And so many of the experiments and the tactics and the little tips and tricks, they're designed around being deliberate with what you're doing and making a specific choice and not just letting things haphazardly happen.
Yes, I'm going to get on a soapbox for a moment here because because we're talking about how productivity is doing the right things, and he
Set
talks.
him off. Sorry,
Yeah,
folks.
this is kind of out of order, but he does talk in the book about email, and email is something that is near and dear to my heart and very timely. As we're recording this 2 days ago, did two 2-hour webinars on email and the real cost of email and things like that. But email is, in my opinion, the number one way to get derailed on and to end up doing things that really aren't the tasks that you should be doing. And man, it pains me to see how big of a problem this is for people. Not that I've mastered it. I mean, I'm just as susceptible to it as anybody else. Although recognizing what's going on is helps a lot, and then creating the constructs where if you can manage expectations where everybody who you deal with via email knows that I only check email once a day. So if I don't get back to you within 24 hours, that's to be expected. That's comes with the territory when you email me. But so many people think that they have to respond right away. And so many people think that when they respond, the answer has to be a yes because they don't want to let people down. They want to, they want to make people happy. They also, it makes them feel good when they say yes to things. And then also, a lot of times people think it's easier for them to just say yes to something than, even if they know that they aren't supposed to be the person who should be doing this, they think it's easier if they just say yes and they deal with it rather than reroute it and delegate it to the person that should really be doing the task. And if
So with the course and all the interviews and stuff you did, that was a thing where people felt like when you got an email, you had to say yes. Because I feel like it's the opposite, at least for me. Maybe I'm weird. To me, it's easier to say no in an email than it is in person. But
Well, it is, but how many more requests do you get via email versus in person every day? Especially for someone like you and myself. Like, we don't work in an office environment, so like all of the requests come via email, and so
true.
we get in a habit of saying no. But when somebody emails you and you know you're going to see them at the board meeting in a couple hours, and you don't want to disappoint them, the tendency is gonna be to say yes. And a lot of times with that dynamic, that organizational dynamic, the people who are making the request, they may know that you aren't the right person for this job. But if you are a good worker and if you will follow through with things, you will often, at least my experience, you will often get asked to do things because they know that you'll take care of it and they don't have to worry about it anymore. And so it's really, really easy when you're looking at it via email to commit to all these things. And then pretty soon, at the end of the day, you look at your to-do list and it's a million items long, and none of them are the things that you would consider really important. Comes back to at Agent Efficiency, we teach that Eisenhower matrix all the time, where you have the things in the upper left corner that are urgent and important, things in the upper right that are important but are not urgent, things in the lower left that are urgent but not important, and then things in the lower right which are neither important nor urgent. And the default, if you live your life out of your inbox, is to live off of the left side of that quadrant, dealing with everything that is urgent. And yeah, you'll get some important things done, but a lot of email is going to fall into that urgent but not important box. And when it comes through, it may even look important because it's somebody else's priorities. So they're not going to hold the same value set when they're looking at how you should spend your time when they make those requests. So you really have to know what is important to you, and you really have to stick to your guns, and you really do have to say no. Chris Bailey says in the book, the most productive word in your vocabulary is no. And I just think that way too often people say yes because they don't really realize how big the things are that they're saying yes to, and then those things add up and they compound, and then pretty soon you're completely overwhelmed and you've got 10,000 unread messages in your inbox and you're not getting home till 8 o'clock at night. And even though you meant to go to the gym every single day during the week, you've only been there twice. It's a pattern.
And I can completely understand it because I am a recovering people pleaser. It's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. It's difficult to say no to people when you want to, I'm a problem solver. I like to do things that people don't really think are possible. So I'm doing that, for example, with this current website I'm building because there's, for example, I guess on top of that is a lot of us use Libsyn for podcasting. And in this case, my client has a podcast that they're using, but they've been publishing the feed in Libsyn and not actually running it through, in this case, a WordPress site. Well, they want to pull that feed into the WordPress site without having to double post, if you can see the rationale there. It's like, well, that's fine. I just wrote a parser that pulls the feed in and then just grabs the top item from that feed and then just displays all the information, uses an HTML5 audio player, boom, you're done. So if you publish something new to Libsyn, boom, it automatically shows up on your website. So it's like, okay, that's awesome. I did that. In this case, my client had no idea that was even an option. It wasn't even something to discuss because it was so far beyond their thinking that it didn't even seem like it was something that was doable. So I love doing that. I love, let's work some magic here and do something they don't even think is possible. I love to do that, but at the same time, saying no to requests and learning how to decline, for me, has been, one, an extremely painful process, and two, has been a very long journey because it wasn't until, well, it was probably at least 4 years ago that I started to realize I'm just saying yes to everything, and this is overloading me, and I can't do this anymore. And I've got to find ways to decline things and start focusing in. And to this day, whenever I get an email or a request saying something's wrong with a script I wrote or there's a bug in something, my first gut reaction is, oh, let me jump in and fix it. Like right now, that's what I want to do. But I've had to, take your email example here. It's like I've had to focus on doing that at a very specific time or just a minimal times. And Chris talks about this in his book, is focusing when you're doing these things so that you're not just constantly doing it. What was it? Like 50 times a day is what the average worker checks email in a day.
Yeah, it's
what?
It's pretty crazy. We did some research for the presentations that we did, and in the financial services industry, the interruptions that are associated with email account for you losing about 3.9 total work days a week.
Wow.
Just dealing with email. And one of the things that I put on here, it's a little bit further down, but it really ties back to email, is how much is an hour of your time worth? Because the average U.S. worker, according to the Huffington Post, spends 6.3 hours per day dealing with email. So if you make even $25 an hour, that's $150 worth of your time. And people don't realize the real cost with that. And there's additional cost too with the wellness, because there's a lot of research that shows that Handling email creates more stress. It basically decreases your life expectancy. It makes you dumber. It lowers your IQ. It does all of this stuff. So there's all these other effects too, but just leave that out of the equation for now. Let's just talk about the money value. If I could give you somebody who could handle all of your email for $150 a day, would you do it? Most people would say $150 a day just to handle my email. That's ridiculous. Okay. But they don't realize that they are spending more than $150 worth of their time that they will never get back. Time that they could be using and investing in something else that would provide much more benefit, and they could take much more action on their goals. Not to mention the improved wellness and all of that. But that's really the decision that needs to be made there when you're talking about things like email. Is what is this really costing me? And understanding the true cost of email then allows you to make more educated and accurate decisions about what systems and what actions, sometimes drastic actions, like hiring a virtual assistant, for example, are you going to take in order to alleviate these problems? And I think that's kind of what Chris was getting at with this whole experiment. Kind of speaking for him, I guess, but he was trying to identify, in my opinion, the pattern that I saw is he wants to identify the best use of his time. When does he work best? I know that's one of the things you wrote down, the biological prime times. How does he work best? What does he need to eat and drink in order to work more efficiently when he does work? That's if people took the time to figure that stuff out, then they wouldn't feel completely drained at the end of the day. It could feel like they hadn't gotten anything done because in reality they haven't. They've been dealing with email all day. You'd be able to focus a lot easier if you just took a little bit of time to step back and get like a big picture, get slightly outside and above the situation, I think is how Sam Carpenter would put it, and work the system. Because when you can get outside of the day-to-day minutia of what's going on, you can see a lot more clearly where things are broken, and then you can take correct actions and fix them.
And so much of it is just knowing when to say yes and no. And that's what we were talking about just a second ago, was saying no. But when you have to say yes to something, we get a lot of email. We have to say yes to it because, it's our contact with a lot of the people we work with. So it's not like I can just say, nope, not going to do email. Like, it just doesn't work in our world. So if I have to say yes to it, and it's a low return task, but it still has to get done, that's where you can start to say yes to, say, a VA or someone else to do that for you, or at least vet it enough to where it's limited on you. And kind of going back to the yes-no thing and you brought up the biological prime times, that's something that I've been doing for a while now, probably a good year, of just not saying yes to anything in the morning. I said that kind of weird. I always say no to things when it's in the morning. And that's primarily because I know that, I get up at 5, and even though Chris is not an early person at all, he was very much against that, but I'm an early person. So I get up at 5, and I know that between 5 a.m. and noon, I'm usually at pretty good energy levels. I'm pretty good that whole period. Early afternoon, not really that great. Late afternoon, I start to come back a little bit, which is why we typically record at about this time, I think, because I think yours tends to work out about the same. And, it dips off again in the evening, and then it's bedtime. So for me, those biological prime times, which Chris, I don't know if he coined that term or if he got it from someone else, but essentially it's the point in the day when your energy levels are the highest, just naturally based on your rhythms for the day. And that's something that I know I've been aware of for quite some time. We typically hear people say, what's the best time in your day? Well, if you know when that best time of your day is and your highest focus and your highest energy levels are, if you can pick those out, that's when you want to put your highest return tasks. Like for me, that would be a lot of writing, it'd be recording, writing code. Those are easily my most valuable tasks. Doing email, getting me to do that at 9:30 in the morning, good luck. Like every once in a while I do because I'm waiting on something and it's important to what I'm doing at that moment, but very rarely will I ever step into that. And it's a thing that when you become aware of it and you know when to say yes and no to it, then that's where you can really maximize your time, and you can step into what we talk about with essentialism. You can, you know, develop the purpose behind the things that you're doing. But that's where those times in the day are points when you really need to say, I'm going to defend this as much as I possibly can because this is a very valuable time in the day for me.
Yes, exactly. Not just email, but also meetings, I would say. That was
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that I wrote down as one of my action items, I believe. I don't know if I put it on here, but I put it in my notes. Chris mentions the idea of limiting the amount of time that you spend each week in meetings. And that's not just at work meetings. That could be limiting the number of slots that you have available to meet somebody for coffee, or the number of times that you're going to meet somebody for lunch. And I tend to say yes to those things because I like to maintain those relationships with people that I'm close to. But one of the things that I want to do, and I've started doing this already I haven't done it using an online scheduler, but I've basically identified on my calendar, these are the times where I am available for meeting for coffee. And these are the times that I am available for meeting for lunch. So for example, my meeting for coffee day might be Friday mornings. And so if somebody says, hey, want to meet for coffee? I can send them a scheduler link and say, yeah, sure, just book a time. And they're going to see only the times that I have available, I've set aside where I can be interrupted, or my day-to-day can be interrupted, and they can book a meeting with me that way. And
Okay, here's my question for you, because you use one of these things and I don't. Do those feel, to the people you send them to, are they impersonal? Like, do they feel like that's a way of you shirking and not being relational to them? Do people ever get that feeling? Because that's part of my angst with using something like that is, okay, the human factor is taken out of it and it feels cold to the other person.
that's a good point. I guess most of the people that I that would request my time know what I do for a living, and so they know
Yep.
that kind of comes with the territory. Like Mike's going to do he's going to have some crazy systems to do things more efficiently. um, so I don't know. I haven't noticed any like negative pushback on it, but I also, to a certain degree, kind of haven't cared because it's like
Yeah.
this is how it's got to be if you want to if you want to carve out the time.
Well,
Like
that's fair.
I want to meet with you, but this is the way it's got to happen if it's going to work. And yeah, I haven't noticed it, but I could see, for the average Joe, no pun intended.
It's okay. Never heard it before.
That could come across as impersonal. So you do have to frame it correctly. I think when Zach has been using that with the podcast, he always, in an email format, for example, as part of the template that he uses, he'll say, I hope you're okay using my scheduler. This is just way more efficient, and it also makes sure that I don't make a mistake and double book. So I think if you frame it like that people
makes
aren't
sense.
going to really have an issue with it.
See, that I could see, and that I might be able to get behind. But I run into a lot of people that I've never met, and they're potential new clients, or there's someone that wants to just talk about a potential business deal. They're people I've never seen face to face, and we're going to, or we're going to jump on the phone. They don't know, and part of this is because I do the business building thing. When I'm meeting with people in that, they actually don't know that I work in productivity at all. So if I come in guns a-blazing with these highly efficient productivity tools, what on earth is this? Where'd this guy come
Yeah,
from? So
I could get that. I remember listening to an episode of Mac Power Users before David Sparks went independent, and he was talking about how he uses Doodle I think it's doodle.com to schedule meetings. And he was talking to a judge and another lawyer, and they were trying to nail down a time, and he didn't even think about it. He just said, well, I'll send you a doodle. And they were both like, what? So yeah, I could see that.
see, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. That's I guess my qualms with it is, okay, this could be helpful. This could cut back, kind of bringing us back around to the book. This could cut back on some of the tasks that are low return or, they need done, but it's not a high value task, having those types of things that just need done and having a tool like that, I can see the value there. I'm just afraid there's a little bit of a major downside that I'm unaware of or going to create. Anyway,
I don't
there's
know that
my
there's necessarily a major downside because, at least in my situation, my schedule is pretty busy. So if I don't use something like this, the chances are that this meeting that we want to have happen is not going to happen. And I've seen
that's
that
fair.
scenario take place where we've been talking about getting together for months, but it never happens. Okay. So using a scheduler link, there's a much greater chance that that meeting actually does happen. In that face-to-face meeting, that's where the value is added to the relationship anyway. So in my opinion, the positive outcome of using this far outweighs any potential negative outcome, but I'm also not dealing with potential clients. So
Yeah, I may try one just cuz. Just to see how it works out.
well, if you do use one, the Doodle, I think it's doodle.com. I should have looked it up. It might be
Okay.
doodle.me, but they also have an update to their iOS app where you can actually use it inside the Messages app. So
What?
imagine a scenario like you've got a group text and everybody's trying to decide on the date and time for the next whatever meeting. You could create a poll in Doodle and send it out to everybody, and then they can, within the Messages app, just vote for the times that they are available or not available. And then you've taken out all of the back and forth.
Huh. It's doodle.com. I looked it up.
Okay.
Okay. I might be buying into this, Mike, but I'm going to stay leery for now.
Skeptical Joe is skeptical.
Yeah. I'll put this to I've got a list of tasks. And we're good at jumping back and forth. So, Chris Bailey talks about the importance of a maintenance day, but
Mm-hmm.
so just to define that, maintenance day, he batches all of his I guess household keep it up to neutral, if you will, tasks. So, empty the dishwasher. I think he had like trim beard and shave or something once a week. But he's got Sunday morning is his time to go through and do a lot of these like household maintenance tasks. And I understand the idea here. I've been using what I call a neutralize perspective in OmniFocus that does something similar to this. It has some things like take out the trash and water the plants, refill business cards. Like I have that type of thing in that perspective. I'm trying to remember where I got the name. That might have been Karosh Dini that I got the name of that from. But it's just it's a project in OmniFocus that maintains all those. And if I get something that's a one-off, like check out Doodle, like I'll take something like that and throw it in there just temporarily, just so I can okay, these are just some things I need to research just to kind of bring myself up to neutral. And I know Asian Efficiency talks about this clear to neutral concept, and that's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of what this is just bring myself up to where I'm not behind. And I think Chris has some good points in batch all this together and do it all at once. I know for me, I don't necessarily like to batch all in one day, but I work through my daily task list. And if and when I get through that whole list, then I move on to this neutralize perspective, and then that clears everything out, and I'm good to go from there. But I try to get through that at least once every couple of days. Otherwise, I have plants that die, Mike, and that's not a good thing.
Right. Yeah, the watering your plants would not be a good idea for a maintenance day, but there's a lot of things that I think the maintenance day makes a lot of sense. And in my experience, there's a lot of things that if I just put them on a list and trust that in the margin of my day, I'm going to get to those things, it's not going to happen. Even if I were to put defer dates or even due dates on them inside of OmniFocus. And so this was one of my takeaways is I want to actually try this. I want to actually implement a maintenance day ritual.
Hmm.
And I don't think it necessarily needs to be every week, but I want to take all of the things that I know I'm supposed to do and get those scheduled where they all fall on one of those days, because I think that being able to completely shift from I got to get this project done or at least move this project forward to just having the being in the mindset that, okay, we're just going to make sure that everything is working, everything is functional. That makes a lot of sense to me. Once you're in that mindset, it's a lot easier to think of the other things that maybe need to be in that that are part of that same project, things that you would be doing in the same mindset. So one of the things, for example, would be like changing the batteries on the smoke detectors. Like that, in my opinion, would fall into that's a perfect type of task for a maintenance day type ritual, whether it's every other week or every month or whatever. And I haven't actually identified all the tasks that need to fall into this, but that's one of the things that have done for my action items is to do that, because in my experience, I would typically put these things into OmniFocus, and then if there's like those bi-yearly tasks, like schedule a dentist appointment, for example, and I know a lot of times like they'll schedule it your next visit ahead of time, but that type of activity where if I see that come up as like, okay, now it's time to do this, my tendency is to say, oh, I don't need to do that right now. It just means that I should be doing that soon, and I'll kick the can down the road, and I'll defer it till next week or whatever, and then next week I'll defer it again and again and again. So I think if I actually had a space on my calendar where that stuff is, like that's the place where that stuff's going to get done, then there's a much greater chance that I follow through on that. I think it was Patrick Rohn who I think maybe it was on Mike Vardy's podcast. He talks about how everything that you need to get done happens within the context of time. And those maintenance type tasks, those are the things that if I don't create the time to do them, they never get done.
Yeah, I can see that. And I know that for me, I have time usually towards the end of my day, like every work day, there's about an hour of what I would call fluff time, but it's not really fluff, because I do like the shutdown ritual that we picked up from, I think it was the Powerful Engagement where I got that one. See, now we've got these action items, and now I'm forgetting which books they came from. And but I do that shutdown ritual, and part of that entails just going through and neutralizing some things, spending some time reading, planning for tomorrow. I do some of those things during that point, but I think having that time every day seems to work out pretty well for me. I think if I try to do them all at once, it might be too much. And one, having kids, it's kind of hard to do that. I'll say that because I've tried to do something similar to that, and it just doesn't work out well with the girls. So if it works for you, kudos to you with the little ones. But I know for me, it's a bit of a challenge. And speaking of maintenance tasks, you're up north. It's getting to where you got to turn off all the water outside so things don't freeze.
It's true.
Don't forget that one. That's a bad one. I had that problem the first winter we were in our house. That did not pipe burst in the basement, and I've since redone our guest room because of that.
Yeah. I've made that mistake myself, although it hasn't forced us to replace anything. Most of the houses that we've been in haven't had a finished basement, so not a huge deal. But yes, that is a great example of a maintenance day task, and that's definitely going to be going on my list.
One thing that Chris talks about in the book, and he picks up, I think the book is Getting Results the Agile Way by J.D. Meyer. This is a very interesting book. I've not read it, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and he pulls some things from that. But something he brought up is J.D. talks about what he calls hot spots. Mm-hmm. If you translate that over to getting things done, we'd call it areas of responsibility or areas of life. I think they would technically be the same thing. But something that was interesting to me is that the way I typically have thought about these areas of responsibility, these areas that I'm in charge of, I think about taking care of myself. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I do some work at our church. I have work life. I've got all these different areas that I'm responsible for. But with Getting Results the Agile Way, he pulls in J.D. Meyer's hotspots, which in this case are mind, body, emotions, career, finances, relationships, and fun. And for some reason, when I read that list, it clicked a lot more than what I've run with in the past. And this is a bit of a problem because I just got done doing the whole OmniFocus course, which is very dependent on my current areas of responsibility. And if I change those, I've got like 20 videos that I have to remake. So I've got quite a bit of resistance to changing these. But to me, there's a lot of value in seeing and looking at these hotspots in that way. And for the listeners here, what Chris Bailey gets at here is that if you put together all of your tasks and projects according to these hotspots and then have a way to look at your projects within those hotspots, it becomes a way for you to evaluate each of these areas of your life and then make decisions on whether or not you need to do something about it or whether or not you need to make adjustments to it, which is, I can say, very helpful because I've been doing that for about 2 years with my areas of responsibility, which are basically the same in my opinion. I've been doing that for a long time. I would just look and see, I don't have any projects applied to this area. I should probably do something about that. It's very eye-opening to see I'm making a commitment to doing this with my finances, but I have no projects pertaining to my finances. So it's very eye-opening to look at things that way. Have you ever done something like this, Mike?
I've not done anything like that officially, like within my task manager or anything like that. I am curious though, do you have a list of all the different hotspots that you have? Because I think that how you label these is kind of important. Would you mind, if you have them available, sharing like what you've defined as your hotspots or your areas of responsibility?
Yes. So, pulling it up so I can read it to you. I have spiritual. Then I call it Joe Bulig, so take care of myself. Husband, father, friend, son or brother, because that's kind of one role there. Our church, taking care of the house or the car. Woodworking, which is a hobby that I find very important to me. And then work. So those are, I think there's 9 there. 10. It's 10 of them.
Right. And I'm glad that you shared those because I think that the tendency can be for people to put down all of their commitments as their hotspots, but that's not necessarily a good indication of a hotspot in my opinion. I am at the moment, my wife and I are going through the Focus course by Sean Blanc together.
Oh yeah.
And part of that, he takes day by day, like what are your relational goals? What are your physical goals? What are your spiritual goals? What are your financial goals? What are your vocational goals? There's like 7 different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are the things that are really important. And those are the things that you basically articulated. So if you're going to implement the hotspots, I guess my advice is to not just look at it through the lens of what, but really going back to the Simon Sinek book, the why. What are the different areas that I want to make sure that I account for, not what are the specific jobs that I want to get done.
That makes sense. And frankly, whenever I look through that list, you can translate them to those hotspots pretty easy. I mean, it's pretty easy to see those. And I do try to make sure that I've got plans for each of those. Again, I keep it in OmniFocus, and those are my folders in OmniFocus, so I'm directly applying projects within those. So it's pretty easy for me to just, let's open up all these folders, and if there's any folder that's empty, that's a problem.
Right.
So that's how I do it, and it's very, very easy to see graphically as I'm looking at the screen to see those.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can we go back and talk about procrastination a little bit? We kind of skipped over this one. I don't know exactly how to lead into this. We've been procrastinating, talking about procrastination.
I didn't want to talk about it. And I've been jumping around. Poor Mike. I've been jumping all over this outline. It's terrible.
It's true. That's okay, though. But this was one of the things that I really liked how he put this. I think this is something that is really, really easy for people to grab onto. And it really provided, for me personally, but I think that just about anybody could get a lot of insight when he talks about the 6 triggers of procrastination. Okay, so he talks about procrastination as the scope of the problem. He talks about how the average student procrastinates 1/3 of their waking hours, stuff like that. But then he has these 6 triggers of procrastination, which are really the reasons why we would procrastinate on something. So the first one is if something is boring. The second one is if something is frustrating. The third one is that if something is difficult. The fourth is that if it is unstructured or ambiguous. The fifth is if it is lacking in personal meaning. And the sixth is that if it is lacking in intrinsic reward. And basically, the more of these triggers that something has, the more likely you are to procrastinate on it. And just looking at this list, a couple key takeaways here. You may not be able to help the fact that something on your list is boring, frustrating, or difficult. Okay, but you can control the fact that it is unstructured or ambiguous. You can write that task in such a way that you know exactly what you're supposed to do there. Okay, we do that at Agent Efficiency. We have a standard operating procedure on how we write stories because we use the Scrum model and we use Jira for managing all of our projects. And we've got the definition of done. It's very, very clear to anybody who opens up any of these tasks what needs to be done with this specific task. So it's not ambiguous. If it is ambiguous, if we haven't written the story well, those are the tasks that get rolled over from sprint to sprint because nobody did anything with it because, I wasn't sure what to do here. The other one, lacking in personal meaning, this comes back to the whole start with why discussion. If you can't articulate why you want to do something, why something is on your task list in the first place, then it really, in my opinion, shouldn't even be on your task list. And again, the way we get back to this is the way we write our stories. So for every task that we have at Agent Efficiency, the story goes something like this. As the business, we want to fill in the blank so that fill in the benefit. Okay. Or as the customer, I want fill in the blank so that I can fill in the benefit. And either format that you decide to use when you're writing the story, it is really, really easy to articulate the why behind what we're going to be doing there. And so applying this to yourself instead of the company, that's the lacking in personal meaning. And then the other one, the lacking in intrinsic reward, I do think that it's really, really important that you celebrate your successes. When you have a successful launch, celebrate, get yourself something, whatever, but just like you don't want to do that all the time, but you do want to give yourself a reward when you complete something, when you do a good job. There's a lot of benefit that comes from, even if it's something very small, even if it's just, I'm going to go out to eat or whatever, those things can create a lot of momentum that can carry you through a lot of the drudgery of the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And for me, I know that I just have a lot of instances where I've got a task on my list, and to be frank, I just don't want to do it. They're things I hate. They're painful. I just don't want to deal with them. And my question, and it's been interesting to see how knowing these triggers for procrastination and understanding them somewhat has allowed the ability to just think through it whenever it happens. So I've got something coming up, I don't want to do it, and I've gotten to a point where I can start to ask myself that question of, why am I resisting this? Why am I so against this right now? What's my deal? Why is this so difficult? Why is this such a challenge? So I don't know that I have all of that figured out, but it's at least interesting to understand them well enough to start to notice it. And this is something he talks about quite a bit in the book, is if you have something that you're doing and you don't always understand it, pause. Take a second to stop and think about it. Again, be intentional about it and try to be deliberate with your decisions as opposed to just letting things haphazardly go by. He talks about that over and over and over again. You'd think we'd get the point.
Do you remember Emmett's Law?
Emmett's Law.
Yeah, he talks about Emmett's Law, which is
maybe
the dread of doing a task uses up more time and energy than doing the task itself.
Yeah, it figures. Probably very true for me. Absolutely. Yep. I get it. It's something I want to try to do, and I've got the time for this. I'm kind of moving into a period where I just need to be a little more creative than I normally have been. And he talks a lot about the value of taking breaks and being willing to, I guess, let your mind wander. This is something I talk about quite a bit in the ideas course that I made, is being willing to take some time off of focus so that your mind can wander and be creative. And I do this somewhat, but I don't do a ton. And it's something that I want to do a lot more of. So what I'm trying to do, Mike, is find some time every single day, which is a challenge, I know, and trying to find the time every day and allow myself the freedom to go for a walk, I guess, and just do something that doesn't require a lot of focus. And if I do that, in theory, it gives me the ability to come up with some new ideas. So I'm trying to find a way to build in this ability to be a little more creative, and hopefully that'll allow allow some bigger gains in the future. But I'm trying to be more intentional with taking breaks, and hopefully that process of taking breaks can yield some better better creative content in the future. That's my hope.
I believe it will. And I think that a lot of times it's hard to take a break because we can't focus on what we intended to get done for any length of time. He talks a lot in the book about interruptions. And one of the things that he talked about, which I think is a great idea, is to keep interruptions at least 20 seconds away from yourself. And like if you're going to set up your office, make sure that if you're working on you're writing or whatever, and you know that you have a tendency to check your text messages, keep your phone 20 seconds away, because then you're less likely to go actually check it. And it comes back to the whole idea of multitasking, which he talks a lot about. And he mentions that specifically people who fall prey to multitasking don't believe that it really affects them. And I think that really, tying this all together, the place that you really see it affecting you is when you do take the breaks, when you do go for a walk, and you realize that your brain is all over the place. Like you just can't control it at all. It's because it's so used to jumping from one thing to the next. It's so ingrained that you can't just be. You can't meditate for more than 10 seconds. He mentions that the limbic system tells you that multitasking works. You don't realize as you're switching from one thing to the next that it really isn't effective. If you are doing that and you were to have somebody follow you around and document how effective you actually are, like they could see it, but in the moment as you're doing it, you don't recognize it. You think, "Oh, I've got this." But then when you look at the results at the end of the day, you realize that you really didn't make a whole lot of progress. And there's a real cost to this. He put that it costs $650 billion in lost productivity every year. Interruptions and recovery time consume 28% of an individual's workday. And another statistic he shared was that it takes 25 minutes when you are interrupted to get back into the task that you left. And if you were really cranking on that task, if you were in the zone, I've seen additional research that shows that it takes an additional 15 minutes to get back into, I guess you could call it the state of flow. So the number one way to get more done is to stop multitasking. And then I would couple that with, like, if you really want to be effective, go ahead down in the task, single task for a while, and then intentionally take that break. Don't just wait till you're interrupted or there's a notification because you got an email that came in because you left your email client open in the background.
Oh, I hate that. I absolutely hate that. I don't know how many times I'll meet with a client and they've got their iPad open or they've got their Mac open or something, or a PC. Or they'll have one of these things open and it's sitting there and it's like every 30 seconds or every minute and a half, something is dinging or flashing, or it's like, come on, turn all this stuff off. I don't know how you guys live like this. This is where you get to where you're into this for a significant amount of time, and then you're looking at it like, whoa, what just happened? Why are you doing that? That's a terrible idea. So
taming notifications is so important, and people don't realize the real effect that it has on on you at a physiological level. There's been a lot of research done that shows that those notifications, they go back to the any benefit approach. So when you get a notification, when an email comes in, there is a chance that it might be something good. So that's really what is causing you to have to check it. When you hear that notification, it's hard to resist switching over to your email client and seeing what just came in. And that's because it's that variable reward. But because there is a reward associated with it sometimes, what it does is those notifications, it's almost like a Pavlovian dog response. It triggers a dopamine hit in your brain, which is the pleasure chemical. It is the exact same chemical reaction that occurs when an alcoholic takes a drink or a drug addict takes a hit. And I talk about this in the email presentation that we do. I'm not equating email with those two substance abuse problems, but you do have to recognize what is happening at a physiological level. And then sometimes you have to take drastic actions to fix it. So we always recommend, if possible, that you just turn off your notifications altogether. No sounds, no banners, no nothing, no red, unread badges. Just when you're going into your email, that's when you deal with email. And then you never think about it other than that.
That's a lot easier said than done.
It is. But, when pain is sufficient, change will come.
No, that's true. That's true. Chris talks about how a lot of like foods and drinks make a big impact on your productivity. If you eat a lot of sugary stuff, it'll give you a boost, but you're potentially going to have a crash afterwards. And he talks about this quite a bit with caffeine and alcohol. He dedicated, what was it? Was it just one whole chapter that he dedicated? I think it was a whole chapter he dedicated to it. And he's talking about alcohol and how it borrows from tomorrow and how coffee borrows from today. And the whole time I'm reading this article, I'm sitting here sipping on a cup of coffee, or this chapter, and I'm sitting there, and every time he'd say something about cutting back on coffee, I would take a drink. Like, no, you can't have my coffee. Like, I'm keeping my coffee. So that was one thing. Like, I know, I understand there are a lot of downsides to from a productivity standpoint, an energy standpoint, a sleep standpoint. I understand. No, you told me to say no. No.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. Although once a year, at the beginning of the year, I do it's a form of a fast where we basically just do fruits and vegetables and kind of reset our bodies.
There you go.
And during those 21 days, I will not drink coffee just to show my body basically who's the boss. But at the same time, like the rest of the year, I do like my coffee. And it's not because I'm reliant on the caffeine. I can say that because every January I can go through that and I don't get the caffeine headaches that some people do.
Right.
But yeah, I'm with you there, where it's just something that I really enjoy the taste of it. And I think ultimately what productivity comes down to is like you do the things that are important to you. You incorporate the things that you like, that you want. And you don't have to do everything. You don't have to maximize every second of every day. It's okay to have, in this case, I'll use the term loosely, but some vices like coffee.
Oh, right.
I think everybody's got to have something like that where they take some pleasure in cheating a little bit once in a while.
One thing that's I didn't put on this list, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, is this rule of 3 that I was talking about earlier. This is a thing he borrowed from, I think it was J.D. Meyer in Getting Results the Agile Way. Essentially what the rule of 3 is, and he takes it very simply to, what are your 3 goals for the week, and what are your 3 things you're going to do today? And when you have just those 3 things, because the question is, why not more than that? Why not fewer? Well, if you go more than that, you have so many that you can't recall them. You can't just say, okay, here are all of them. Maybe you can. Maybe you're good at doing 5, but 3 is a more universal number that you can fall into. And if you go less than that, you can, but now you're going too few and you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. So he falls into this rule of 3. And this is something that I can say is extremely helpful. I've been doing this on a weekly basis for a good 9 months ahead of this. This works out really well. There's a lot of these tips I've been doing for a long time. But I've not really been doing it on a daily basis. I even, people call them MIT's most important tasks. But to me, it's a little different than that. It's not an exact task as much as it is a group of tasks or a goal for that day. So for me, I know that this rule of three is something that applies to my week and then also to the day. And this is something that I've been doing, like I said, for on a weekly basis for a long time, but I want to start doing it on a daily basis, and I have been the last couple days. But I want to continue that. So I'm taking that as one of my action items. But this rule of three is one that I think has a lot of power if you let it. I mean, you have to be willing to put in the time to figure them out and determine them. But if you're willing to do that, I mean, you can start to move forward pretty well with it. I think you've got this one down for you too. Am I reading that right?
Yep. Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to actually implement that into my journaling template. So that's really as far as I want to take that one. There's really no definition of done other than the 5 minutes it takes me to update my my Launch Center Pro action
Right.
that I use for creating the day one entry at the end of the day every day.
Of course, you're digital.
Yep. Actually, I'm not sure if I ever showed that to you, but I have a Launch Center Pro action which gives me a series of prompts and then it turns it into a markdown table inside of day one.
What?
It's pretty slick.
That sounds awesome.
I can actually find it. Maybe let me update it, and then I'll be happy to share that. We can put it in the show notes.
There you go.
But yeah, that's one of the cool things about this book is that there are a lot of little things that are actionable. So I actually have 4 different action items here, but that's because they're all pretty simple. Like that one is not going to take me very long. I just got to update my journaling template.
Right.
Another one I wrote down is I want to structure my downtime and weekends. So I've been planning and putting on my digital calendar every hour of every day during the week, but I've left Saturdays and Sundays open. And I think that there's a lot of value to scheduling the time to play and actually take that downtime, extending that same approach to every hour of my life, so to speak. I think if I'm more intentional about it that way, then there's also a better chance that I'll follow through with some of the, the family things that we want to do, like going to the apple orchard and stuff like that, which is kind of a Midwestern thing to do in the fall. For those
Oh yeah,
of you who
we've
aren't
been there a couple
familiar.
times already.
Right. Another thing I wrote down is the maintenance day ritual, which we talked about, and then also limiting the amount of time that I spend each week in meetings. Again, not just work meetings, but just identifying that if I want to meet people for coffee, whatever, actually carving out the time every week for that to happen, and then having a scheduler set up where people can actually do that. And that actually leads into one other point I wanted to talk about here.
Okay.
We don't have to really go deep into this, but this is one of the big things I got here out of the book is that people are the reason for productivity. And so that scheduler, if you are running into negative pushback by using it, then I would, in that instance, stop using it because it is more important that you have an impact on the people in your life, that you don't destroy the platforms that you've maybe worked really hard to build by trying to force them to use a digital tool, which may be a little bit more efficient for you, but causes a lot of friction for them. Ultimately, the reason that you want to be productive is that you want to have more time to spend with the people that you care the most about. So for me specifically, that's my family. That's the reason that I want to be productive. That's what got me going down this whole productivity journey, which led to me getting a job at Asian Efficiency. Is I was looking at my schedule, I was looking at my commitments, I was looking at my day-to-day and saying, I don't want to be here the rest of my life. I want to be able to take a day off whenever I want to and go to the museum with my kids because we homeschool them and just not feel bad about it, not worry about it. And so, I mean, I've been blessed, I've been fortunate. I'm in a situation now where that can happen, but if I wouldn't have prioritized that, then it wouldn't have. And so I think that it's really, really important to recognize that the why ultimately for all the things, all the productivity is people.
Yeah, I think that's invaluable in that the things that we do, all these tips and tricks, and I have this conversation with my wife on occasion because I'll pull out my phone and I'll be typing something into drafts so that I don't forget it. And she gets on to me once in a while for using my phone too much. And the thing is that usually, and I'm saying usually very intentionally there because I'm human, But usually when I'm pulling out my phone like that, it's because I'm writing something down and I'm typing it in so I don't lose it. And we've had this conversation a number of times. Is I'm using that so that I can focus here because I have a race car brain. So if I don't write down the solution that I just thought of for the website that I'm dealing with, I've got a problem with the code and I've been thinking through PHP and now I've got the issue. I just figured out something major that might be wrong. I'm going to write that down because I'm not going to, I don't want to lose that. Well, if I don't write it down, my mind goes through this cyclical process of trying to remember it and trying not to forget it. So I continually keep thinking, like I just keep thinking about it and I won't let it go. And I've had that conversation with her. I was like, I'm pulling my phone out so that I can write this thing down so that I can focus here so that I'm not off in la la land in my mind thinking these things through over and over and over again. This is the GTD capture process. And I know that for me, that's what allows me to focus on those relationships right in front of me. And that's the point behind a lot of what we do is to allow us to do that. And some of that has to do with the ability to focus on those relationships. This is something that's come up yet again, meditation. He talks about it, has a whole chapter on it. I'm going to try this again, Mike. So this is an action item for me. And I talked about the rule of 3 that I'm doing daily. I talked about taking longer. I think I talked about taking longer lunch breaks. Anyway, I'm taking a break. I want to do a daily walk for the creativity thing. And then I want to start meditating again. And I think there's some value there. I've tried it in the past. It doesn't work in the past, but I think I'm not doing it right, I don't think. And I'm willing to try it, but I'm going to say that I'm going to do this for 2 weeks before I evaluate it at all. So I'll probably talk about it on the next episode, depending on when we record it. If it's 2 weeks, perfect. But I'm going to do this for 2 weeks before I even consider if it's good or bad, just so I can try to see it. But that brings me to one thing that I was reading this book, and he starts off talking about meditation, and then he has a whole chapter about it later on. And he talks about taking walks in nature. Then he talks about how you should exercise because that's helpful for your energy levels. He talks about eating mindfully, like cooking meals very specifically and enjoying them. He talks about getting a full night of sleep. He talks about all of these things that require a decent amount of time to do them. And I was left with the question, when does this guy get his work done? Like, when does he actually sit down? Like, all these things are designed around high energy, extreme focus. And I was like, okay, when does he get all his work done? There's no way he has kids. He never talked about having kids. So there's so much of this that, at least for me, I feel like I'm cramming into tight spaces already because, like, mindful eating, good luck. That's just not going to happen in our house. Like, the fact that we can get sat down and enjoy a meal together, period, that's a success. Being able to sit and focus on what I'm eating, not going to happen. So there's just some things like that there's no way you're going to do some of these things if you have kids. So for me, those I'm glossing over. But I just kept asking this question, okay, when does he schedule his actual work as opposed to all the things that help him get his work done?
Yeah, well, I think this was his work for a whole year. I mean, this started off as a year of productivity, and I think it's since transitioned into a life of productivity. But yeah, when he did it, he did it because he was in a spot where he could take a whole year and devote it to this. And right away, like I had a little bit of a moment where he's talking about how, like, I was able to do this, and this, and I was like, oh man, that would be really nice. But you just got to get the 80-20 basically, because no matter where you're at, you're not going to be able to apply 100% of this stuff effectively. Like, everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different, and some of the stuff that didn't work for him maybe would work for you or me.
True.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of value here, I think, in him just sharing his experiences. One thing I did wish he would have shared is that he talked about in the section where he did the experiment about how long he worked. He mentioned that when he worked 20 hours a week, he was almost as effective as 90 hours a week. I wish he would have quantified that. I wish there would have been actual numbers there so I could look at how effective he really was with 20 hours a week. Like, how close was it really? That's the one question I had after
Yeah,
reading it.
yeah. I saw that and I thought the same thing. I haven't looked, but I'm willing to bet he's got it somewhere on his website because I'm sure that was a lot of what he was talking about with a year of productivity. So I'll do a quick search, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. If not, I'll skip it. You can tell that he's written a lot just from the way he writes. He's very relatable. It's very easy to read, I think, because one, the chapters are short. I put down, it's a quick read and full of pointers. We've talked about this is a pretty dense book. There's a lot that you can pick up here. One thing that I kind of got bothered by is he's very politically correct. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But there was some things like he would talk about, tackle two birds at one time. I'm like, no, that's not the phrase. The phrase is kill two birds at one time with one stone. It's like you don't tackle birds with stones. Like that's the whole point. This is a hunting analogy. Like this is not. Anyway, there were a number of those that I had picked up. I was like, really? You're gonna destroy that? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't actually catch that specific example, but I think that you're probably correct in that he would be classified as very politically correct. I liked his writing style. I thought it was really, really engaging and approachable. There were a couple times where I wish he would have dove a little bit deeper into some of the actual outcomes, as opposed to, like we mentioned, the how long he worked example. There were a couple other instances where I wish like he would have dove into the results of the research that he quoted and stuff like that a little bit more. He does cite it all, but again, I'm too lazy to go read it all for myself.
True. It was a breath of fresh air after reading Innovator's Dilemma.
Yes.
I'll give it that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I read this one pretty quickly. Again, because I didn't do all of the different experiments and action items that he gives you at the end of every chapter. But if you're just getting into productivity, I think those would be really, really valuable. So I think that the way he wrote it is great. And no matter where you are in your productivity journey, there's a lot that you can get out of it. But for complete newbies, who a lot of this stuff is brand new, then you're really going to get a lot out of this book. And in that particular instance, I would say make sure that you do actually go through and do all of those exercises, because a couple of them at least are going to be the aha moments that make the light bulbs go on, that are really going to impact you and are really going to make a difference in how productive you are, how efficient you are, and ultimately how effective you are.
So ratings, for me, I know that I went through this and there was a lot that I could pick up. There's a lot that I already knew or that I've done or been doing for quite a while. To me, it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I'm not getting much out of this particular piece, but that's simply because I work in this space. I've read a lot about it. I've done a lot of this. I didn't do a lot of the experiments that you're talking about as well, just because I've either done them already or I know the result that I'll get from it, just because I've got some of that awareness. So some of that and some of my own just opinions on how things were written, I gave this a 4.5 because I think this is an excellent book, but it just doesn't feel like a full-on 5 quite. It doesn't quite get that far for me. So I put it at 4.5. But I think it's an excellent book, and if it's for, like, if I run across someone who's wanting an introduction to productivity, I think this could be a great book to at least help people get jump started with it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm also going to give it a 4.5 because I guess you could classify me a productivity expert. I don't really feel like an expert. I just feel like I have some experience. But I was still able to get a lot out of this book. And I think for the right person, this is absolutely, without a doubt, 5 stars. Definitely read it. And I would say it's worth a read no matter where you are or how experienced you are in the productivity space. Like I said, I got a lot out of it. So I think that pretty much every single one of our listeners who would pick up the book is going to find something in there. You may have to jump around to the appropriate sections. You may decide to completely skip the chapter on meditation if you're like Joe and decide that.
But I'm going to try it. I'm going to give it another round.
Right. But yeah, I agree. 4.5.
For upcoming books, the next one. Okay, so I picked this one Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker. This is for those of you who have been wanting to read along with us, but these books are too long. So this is a short one. I will likely read it the day before because it's, I got it right here. It's 70-some pages, but the pages are about a third the length as what these other books are. So as far as actual pages, I'd say it's probably around 25, 30 pages of actual, like a full-on book size. So I think this is a quick read for me, but if you are wanting to read along, but these things have just been too much, this would be a good one to jump in on. So if you want to get the experience of reading it before you listen to it, this is where you can jump in. So Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker, that's the one we'll be doing next. And then Mike, you picked what?
I picked the 12-week year. And I forget, I don't have it in front of me, so I forget exactly who it's by. I apologize, 12-week year people. But I did want to point out, by the way, this Managing Oneself. We talked about The Innovator's Dilemma and how it was such a business book, and it was published by Harvard Business
I
Review.
know, I saw that.
So Managing Oneself on the Amazon listings is Harvard Business Review Classics. So I'm not sure what to think about this one, Joe. I haven't got it yet. It's coming tomorrow. But I'm a little bit skeptical.
Well,
fortunately, it's 72 pages. So even if he goes whole hog on disk drives again, it's only 72 pages.
well, I'm flipping through it. It's right in front of me. As I flip through it, what I'm reading is nothing like The Innovator's Dilemma.
Okay, good.
Does that make you feel better?
Mm-hmm.
So Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker is up next. Then Mike picked the 12-week year. If you have a book that you want us to go through, and I've been getting a few of these, you can make a recommendation. We've talked about this numerous times in the past, but you can make a recommendation through our website, bookworm.fm. You can also see the list of books that have been recommended and the ones that we've already read out there as well. But all of that can be found out at bookworm.fm. It's just in the sidebar there.
And we will start doing some of the recommendations pretty soon.
Yeah, actually, I think once we get through the 12-week year, we jump into one, Brain Chains. I think that's the one that comes after that. That one's been recommended, I think, 3 times. So, yeah, we're going to jump into that one, and that's a long one.
Yep. And then also, if you are enjoying the show, we would really appreciate it if you would go over to iTunes and leave us a review, because that will help other people find the show. iTunes has an algorithm that is a little bit funky on how they feature podcasts, but one of the things that they look at is the number of reviews and also how recent they are. So if you are enjoying the show, that would help us out a lot if you would go let us know. And if there's something you don't like, let us know that as well. We'll try to do better.
Awesome. So if you're wanting to jump in and you haven't had a chance to do so in the past, this is your chance to do it with Managing Oneself by Peter Drucker. I'll drop a link to that in the show notes so it's easy to pick up. And we look forward to talking through that with you in a couple weeks.